All right. So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. So I'm Anna Hall, for those of you who maybe have seen my face and heard my voice on some of these earlier as the facilitator of questions. I'm the CEO of the Northeast Charter Schools Network, and we support the great work of the New York Charter Schools Association. Yomika Bennett, the head of the New York Charter Schools Association, and who normally hosts these webinars, was called into another urgent meeting. So I'm going to fill in for her today and play hostess. Many of you have likely been joining our weekly webinars on Tuesdays, where we've gotten policy updates from authorizers. You can give a little wave to David, Susie, and Aaron, who are here today listening in. In addition to those policy and regulation topics, we've also been offering subject-specific webinars on Thursdays in response to some questions and desires that folks have raised up to us. Recordings of these webinars, both of them Tuesdays and Thursdays, are available on our website. We will be holding another weekly webinar, which I think will be jam-packed with policy updates next Tuesday. And then next Thursday, also at 4 p.m., they're all at 4 p.m., we'll be discussing parent engagement in the current context with Carrie Rodriguez of the National Parents Union, as well as some special guests, parents themselves. So we've heard from a lot of schools that folks are concerned about student recruitment for next year for two major reasons. One, because strong enrollment is essential to a healthy school budget, which we know everyone is thinking about. And also because in the current context, many of the typical student enrollment activities like open houses, visiting prospective students' homes, community centers, person-to-person type engagement aren't possible. So we're super excited to be joined today by Allison Newell, Max Davidson, and Joe Herrera of Underdog Strategies, which specializes in digital ads for student recruitment and building grassroots supports for charters and other grassroots type advocacy and political activities. And I can just personally say, having worked with them on some charter specific issues, I'm very complimentary of their ability to think with a charter brain and reach communities. So also joining us and listening in and available to help field authorizer type questions following the presentation are David Frank, Susie Carello, and Aaron Cochran, and we appreciate them as always in so many ways. So as with prior webinars, we will record this, and the recording and the materials, both the deck as well as a one-pager that the folks from Underdog have prepared, will be available on our website following the call. So with that, I'll hand it over to Joe, Allie, and Max, and we will use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to take questions, which you're welcome to pose at any point during the presentation, but we'll hold them till the end to field them. So with that, Joe, Allie, and Max, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Anna. All right, let me get my screen share up. We have a deck we're going to run through, and as Anna mentioned, this deck and a resource guide will be made available after the presentation. All right, can everyone see the slides? Great. So thank you, Anna, and thank you so much to the New York Charter School Association for hosting us today. We are happy to be here today talking about digital Facebook and Instagram ads and how schools can be using them to boost their student recruitment efforts. We're going to be talking about this type of student recruitment more broadly, but we do kind of want to hold it in the context of the coronavirus. I know that schools are facing a lot of challenges right now as far as student recruitment and engagement with students. as during remote learning. But we do want to focus on this for a number of reasons, including what Anna mentioned around more traditional methods of student recruitment not really being on the table for the foreseeable future. And we actually think there's quite a few unique opportunities here for you to be in touch with parents and recruit new students. So before we jump into the content, I just want to quickly introduce our team. My name's Allison Newell. I co-founded Underdog Strategies with Joe Herrera in 2018. Prior to that, we spent about 5 years together working for charter advocacy in New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. Since founding Underdog, we still do some charter school advocacy work. We also help charters with student recruitment using digital media. And primarily we focus on electoral politics and getting more progressive and constituent-minded candidates into office. So Joe, maybe you want to say hello?
Hi, excited to join today and support you all with your student recruitment needs. And I think Max may have dropped off for a second.
Did we lose Max?
I think so.
Okay, well, I will introduce Max. Max is our Director of Campaigns and Advocacy. He joined us in January and is really helping us through this whirlwind advocacy and campaign season. We're all kind of rethinking how all this is done given the coronavirus. I also asked the team to wear our nicest shirts today, and as you'll see, Max definitely won the challenge there. So I want to just take a step back and think about our goals for today. I acknowledge there's probably some folks coming from a lot of different backgrounds here today. Some of you may specialize in digital advertising, and that's great. Some of you may work at schools where you use digital advertising, but maybe you don't have a lot of insight into that process or how that works. So we hope to provide more context for you. And then some of you may not be using digital advertising at all in your schools, and hopefully are considering it. So we're going to try to provide a primer and a roadmap for those folks and how to get started. And then, so hopefully there's something for everyone, you know, whether you're using social media or whether you're starting now. And then our second main goal is just demystifying paid digital media. I think a lot of us come at this thinking that it is very complicated, very complex. I know for me personally, some of the campaigns that I've worked on or organizations that I've worked in, it seems like when it comes to digital media, we just pass that off to maybe the youngest person on our team because we don't understand social media and we don't really want to touch it. I'll also say that the quality goes a long way here. So you can put up a slew of Facebook ads, but by small tweaks to the audience or the ad copy or the design, you can really get your bang for your buck. So not all ads are effective, but it's very easy to make them effective with a little bit more sort of know-how and technique. So we want to sort of talk about some of those pieces today. And the other thing that I want to flag is, or just bring up to sort of ground us, especially for those of you who already do use paid digital media ads at your schools. Joe and I have worked with a number of schools, and when we come in to sort of audit how they're currently running social media, a lot of them are doing a great job. Some of them are doing a great job and they're running awareness campaigns, and maybe they pump thousands and thousands of dollars into their campaign and thousands of people have seen their ads, but we realize that they haven't been running a type of ad called a lead generation campaign, which allows you to actually capture parent contact information and turn those leads into maybe student applicants and then into enrolled students. So I want you to keep that in mind. There's, you know, some schools are doing this to varying degrees of efficacy, and we want to make sure that you can kind of improve all the steps that you're taking when it comes to targeting, ad design, ad copy, and placement. So what is paid digital advertising? Many schools on today are probably currently using means of paid advertising. So you may be advertising your school on buses or using direct mail or at bus stops. Those are all great means of advertising. The challenge with some of those is you are not generating leads. You're pumping advertising out, but you're not getting anything back in terms of data or information about who you're talking to. We're talking today about paid digital advertising because we think it's the best way to actually collect data and turn people into leads who will then ultimately become students. And there's a few different types of paid digital advertising that are probably worth mentioning. One is you can advertise on Google. So your advertising for your schools will come up on a Google panel when people are conducting searches. You can also boost your school's website when people are searching in your district. You could do an advertisement on a website like Chalkbeat. But today we're focusing on Facebook and Instagram ads. And we're focusing on them for a few reasons. One is because they have been incredibly effective in past years with the schools that we've worked with. So even pre-coronavirus, we've worked with schools who have been able to recruit hundreds more students by using Facebook and Instagram ads. Secondly, and I want to touch on this quickly because Anna already did, but in the current context, it's going to be more and more important that we figure out how to reach parents and students where they're at, which right now is at home. So there's a lot of people who are scrolling on their devices through Facebook and Instagram, and there's kind of a unique opportunity now where they're easier to target than ever because your ads are more likely to be seen.
And I'm going to take a couple minutes just to discuss the fundamentals of digital advertising. So going into our first section here, discuss uses of digital advertising. So you run digital ads for 3 broad reasons and then 3 broad sets of tactics, but this is all in service of driving recruitment to your charter school. Now, the first 2 reasons you run digital ads are similar, but there is an important distinction between them. First, you want to be developing name recognition amongst a wide audience of people, but then you also want to be narrowing in and targeting parents in particular about the school, about its offerings, and about its programs. And then on top of that, you want to be capturing the contact information of parents who are interested in enrolling their child into your school so you can drive them into your application and outreach process. And all of these steps play with one another and strengthen one another symbiotically. So some other key benefits of running digital ads are that you can really narrowly target your audience based on their geography, interests, demographics, location. So you can really finely target who is going to see your ads. Maybe comparing this with buying an ad on a bus, you're paying for every single person who looks at that bus to your best part of your spend. However, when you pay for a digital ad, you're only targeting parents who are maybe likely to be interested in charter schools or who are similar to parents who have enrolled children into your school in the past. Additionally, Facebook and Instagram are linked into one ad management platform, so you're able to double your reach with one platform, and you don't have to do anything behind the scenes in order to run ads on both platforms simultaneously. It's automatically linked for you. However, there are a number of things you have to be watching out for when you're running digital ads. The number one is that the platform and requirements for running ads changes often, occasionally without a lot of notice. So making sure that you're staying up to date on latest regulatory rules is going to be really, really important. In our resource guide, we have some great blogs that you can use to help stay up to date on this. Additionally, Facebook will waste your money. Always be under the assumption Facebook wants to waste your money. A great example of that is if you do not explicitly tell Facebook not to run ads at 3 in the morning, Facebook will run ads at 3 in the morning. So another great example of that is if you don't have good targeting, if you don't have great ad images, or if your copy isn't concise and easy to read, that will all make your ads less effective. So it's going to be really, really critical to reviewing your ads constantly, looking at what themes are doing the best, looking at what images are doing the best, refining those and taking out ads which underperform, because Facebook won't do that for you. And lastly, I just want to discuss the broad funnel of engagement which you're going to be using to help recruit students. Now, I know this seems really complicated at first blush, but really what you just want to think about is what is the ultimate purpose of this campaign, and it's to enroll students. And what you're going to be thinking about is these are 4 types of campaigns, generally speaking, these top 4. Brand awareness, website traffic, content engagement, and lead generation. Lead generation is that final step where you get a parent's contact information and you make that call and you begin informing them about the school and encouraging them to apply. However, before you do that, you're going to be running brand awareness campaigns where large amounts of people see your school. You're going to be driving them to your website. You're going to be having them engage with content on your Facebook page, such as student and parent testimonials. And what all of that does is now when you ask parents digitally to learn more about the school, they've already seen it. Maybe they've been to your website or they've seen some great testimonials. So that all strengthens your ability to target and strengthens the likelihood that parents will end up applying. And one more note before I pass back over to Joe and Allison. This all might seem, once again, really complicated. On the back end, it's as simple as just making sure you have the right check mark in the right place. So while this may seem intimidating at first, It's really easy on the back end. All you have to do is just make sure you're checking off the right box when you first make your ad.
Okay, great. So let's talk about how you would get started in building your ad campaign. We've broken down the ad campaign process into 10 steps. So what we're going to focus on today are steps 1 through 7. We only have about 30 minutes together, and we want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. So I just want to remind folks that we're going to kind of move through this relatively quickly. Step 7, where you actually get to the creation and the placement of the ad, is probably the most cumbersome when it comes to being in the back end of Facebook and the ad manager. So we'll be providing a link to a resource guide that has instructions and videos on how to do those ad placements and designs. But so to just kind of quickly walk through the process before we take a deep dive on each one of these steps, we're going to start with determining enrollment goals. So that would be looking ahead to the next year and figuring out how many seats you want to fill. Then you're going to backwards plan from that. So depending on how many seats you need filled, you're going to set a lead generation goal. So that's how many people are actually going to click your ad and give you their contact information. From there, you want to determine your timeline. So the longer the timeline you have, the better. The more time you have to get your leads. The tighter the timeline, the more challenging and the more money you'll probably have to spend in a shorter amount of time. So your budget, again, will be built around your timeline. From there, you want to determine your audience. So what types of parents are you trying to contact? Where do they live? What do we know about them? Can we use current parent data to make a lookalike audience, which we'll talk more about? And you're also going to want to build an outreach team. Joe will talk a lot more about this, but this could be one person. It could be a team of folks who are going to be receiving these leads on a daily basis and reaching back out to them to convert a lead into an applicant, into an enrolled student. Once you sort of have all this in place, you're ready to actually create your ads and place them. You're going to put a ton of content up. Some of it will do great, some of it will not do great. You'll take the bad stuff down, and you'll move into steps 8, 9, and 10, where you're basically continuously monitoring the ads. And as I mentioned, taking the bad ones down, putting more money behind the good ones, and reaching out to the leads in a pretty timely fashion. So let's jump into step number 1, which is determining enrollment needs. If you're already well-versed in student recruitment, then you probably already know what this looks like, but looking ahead to what seats need to be filled next year, and the more information that the team that is managing your ads knows about these students, the better. So for example, if you tell me you need 100 students next year, I might give you 100 kindergartners, but what you really need is 100 7th graders. So try to make sure that you have a really concrete breakdown of what you need. You need 25 first graders, 25 second graders, and 25 third graders, for example. And then are there any other metrics that you're trying to hit? So we've worked with Public Prep, for example, that runs single-sex charter schools. So gender is something that we take into the equation. We're looking for 100 girls in the 6th grade. You also might have other metrics that you're trying to hit, maybe around special education or ELL, or maybe you just have a hunch about which geography that these kids need to be pulled from. So trying to determine that on the front end is really, really helpful to setting a clear campaign goal to make sure that you're backwards planning to hit the specific enrollment needs that you're looking for. So the other thing I just want to touch on is I know that charter schools are facing a lot of challenges right now. It's sort of hard to say what enrollment looks like next year. I've heard a lot of conflicting ideas. I think that with the level of uncertainty in the world right now, a lot of parents probably are not going to be changing up their child's school because that can add a level of uncertainty. So hopefully you don't see, hopefully you see good retention in your schools next year. Another concern I've heard is that especially if you're a school in New York City, potentially maybe families are worried about the crowding and could be moving to more rural parts of the state or the country. So I think part of your enrollment needs is going to be based on what you've seen in the past and just keeping those rates constant, but also assessing the current context. And we want to be really context specific, especially when we're thinking about where these leads are coming from. So once you have your enrollment goal, you want to then develop your lead generation goal. So this is the number of parents that actually will click on your ad, fill out the contact information. So type in their name, cell phone number, and email address, which then you can collect and reach out to them to turn them into an actual applicant. So again, this is a place where we're going to need to make some assumptions. And you can make these assumptions based on past data and also considering the current context. So you want to figure out what percentage of applicants what percentage of leads will actually apply to the school and what percentage of those applicants will actually enroll at the end of the day. Based on our past experience, schools should generally be looking to generate at least 5 to 10 times more leads than enrolled students that they actually need. And this table should put a finer point on that. So similar to any of you that have done organizing or community outreach, it's like if you invite 100 people to a party, maybe 70 show up. And that's sort of how lead generation and student applications work. So this is based on a past campaign that we ran. This data is based on a past campaign that we ran. Again, it's very context specific, but hopefully this sort of elucidates or illustrates the process. So if we were looking to get 100 students, we would actually probably want to generate upwards of 800 or 900 leads. So we get 834 leads. Only about 30% of those leads, once followed up with, actually applied to the school. So that left us with 250 applicants. Let's assume all those applicants got seats after the lottery. Then only about 40% of those applicants became enrolled students. So you can see that there's drop off at each step of this process, and that's normal. You definitely want to account for some of that. But it's also really important to remember that these 30 and 40 percentages, for example, are areas within your control. Joe will talk a little bit more about the process for reaching out to folks, but the quality of touch points that you have with your parents really determines how you bring them along throughout the process. So we've seen schools that do a great job of in-house recruitment and following up with parents and answering their questions and telling them about the school and walking them through the application process. Those are the parents where you have the highest conversion rate. And then we've seen schools that sort of sit on a lead for maybe 2 weeks and then call them and can't get a hold of them. And that's where we've seen the most drop off. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and it's helpful to remember you have a lot of control over this percentage by having really quality points of contact with these parents.
Thank you, Allison. So once you have identified your lead generation goal, next you're going to want to determine a timeline for your digital ad campaign. And we get this question a lot. So when is the right time to start recruiting students? And the short answer is all the time, right? So you want to make sure, now of course, depending on your school's recruitment and enrollment needs and your budget, that may not be feasible. However, if you do find yourselves in a place where you're under enrolled, we do recommend the timeline is urgent. So you want to run an awareness campaign and a lead generation campaign simultaneously. And I know this question just came up in the chat. And the reason for that is brand awareness campaign is going to reach way more people with a less spend than a lead generation campaign. So by running those simultaneously, you'll be able to touch more people with your message. And of course, that'll get a better return on your investment. If you are under enrolled, I recommend you start now. It does take time, and you want to make sure that you're starting now to make sure that you're hitting your goal for enrollment. Whenever you do start your digital ad campaign, you want to start with a brief testing phase. No more than a week with an ad buy of $200 to $500. This is going to allow you to test and see what ads are working, which ads are successful, and also you can get a rate per lead, and this will help you build your budget to determine how much I need to budget to reach the goal of students that I'm trying to recruit. Next, we have a recommended timeline. So here, you want to start generating a list of leads at least 1 to 2 months before everyone else starts doing their outreach, right? October, November, we know the charter school applications open. We have high school fairs, open houses. Everyone is trying to talk to parents and students and recruit them to the school. By this time, if you started a lead generation campaign in August, September, you've already had the first touch. You've already developed a list of leads, and you're now walking them through the application process while others are still making their first pitch. So I would recommend August, September is a good time to kind of start your lead generation campaign. Again, 1 to 2 months works. Don't do it 4 months out, because some of those people will not even remember that they filled out a lead generation form, right? So I think that 1 to 2 months works. You don't want to start it in June and then follow up with people in October and November. January, April is your peak student recruitment period. I'm sure all of you are well aware of this. April 1 through April 10, we're running lotteries. This is the time when you want to put the most of your money into ads. And this is also the time parents know is the time to apply to charter schools. So they look between January and April. And in May to mid-August, this is a really great time, some downtime to run brand awareness campaigns to educate individuals and just boost public awareness about your school, your name recognition of the school, and your curriculum and offerings. Next, talk about building a budget. So cost per lead varies depending on a number of factors, some of which is out of your control. The size of your district, demand for options in the district, your school's reputation and name recognition, how many schools are actually competing for the same audience. All of that plays into the cost per lead. However, there are some things within your control, such as the quality of your ad designs, really smart and strategic targeting. They all have a significant impact and can lower your cost per lead. Graphic design and copywriting and placement can be done internal if you have the skill set and the bandwidth for it, or you can hire a firm. And we'll talk a little bit about what firms cost. It will charge you in addition. And the next slide, this is budget estimates. Our assumption here is based on our past experiences. Cost per leads range from $12 to $20. Again, that's dependent on your context and the timeline you're recruiting students. Our assumptions here are based on the 3 different student recruitment goals. As you see with high quality ads, strategic targeting, on average, you can assume that you will convert about 30% of your overall leads to enrolled students, as Allison mentioned earlier. This table outlines what you would spend on ads only. So if you, the cost to consider is ad copy, who's writing the copy for your ad, the designing the ads, and then placing the ads. These are the costs to consider. You can do that. Also, another cost to consider, of course, is building an outreach team to follow up with leads. If you choose to hire a firm, most firms charge between 20 to 25% of your overall ad spend. So that 20 to 25% is not in this table, that's in addition. Of course, your options are you can do this in-house or hire a firm. If you do choose to do this in-house, someone who is digitally savvy and can just basically know a little bit about Facebook. It can create ads and write copy. Placement, it does take, I would say it takes you can probably learn, it's not rocket science. I've learned in about a day, and then practicing to get my cost per lead down over time really helped me fine tune my targeting. Most schools don't do this themselves. They do hire firms like ours. So if you are interested, or if you have any information, want information on firms that do this, we're not pitching you on this. You should definitely go ahead and try this. And if you have someone digitally savvy on staff, try to do this in-house. But if you do need to reach out to a firm, we do this, and we also know other firms that do this as well. However, we do recommend that if you need an outreach team to follow up with leads, you do that in-house. No one knows more about your school and can answer parent inquiries better than your staff. However, there are firms that will cover this as well. So we have heard schools look at some of these figures and say, wow, $20,000 to get 100 students, that's a lot of money. And I would just note that, it's $16,150 is your per pupil funding for each student you recruit. So look at this more as an investment and not necessarily a waste of your money. Next, we'll talk about determining your audience. So in determining your audience, there is, as we mentioned earlier, targeting can be narrowed down into specific audience based on interests, geography, demographic, people who have visited your website, and or people deemed similar to your current parents. This is what we called a lookalike audience. This is probably one of the most effective Facebook tools that you can use to target and get a really good return on your investment for student recruitment. So creating a lookalike audience, you want to, well, first you need to collect current parent data and any applicant data that you have. The more identifiers you use, the better match rate you're going to get on a Facebook lookalike audience. So identifiers range from name, address, date of birth, gender, age, and you want to include as much of that as possible to make sure you're getting the right audience. When creating a lookalike audience, I would recommend starting with about 500 pieces of data So if you have a parent's name, that's one piece of data. So if you have 200 parents enrolled in your school and you have their name, email, and phone number, that's well over 600 pieces. That's a good start. However, the more you use, the more more successful you will be in recruiting students. Outside of creating lookalike audiences, the other thing that comes up, and especially here in New York City, is geography. One of the first questions, and I did student recruitment before, is like, how is my kindergartner getting back and forth to school? Is, how likely are my parents to enroll in your school based on geography? So you do have some options. Facebook does have a tool where you can geofence areas that are that public transportation that connects to your school. If you run a school bus and you know the route, you can actually encircle some of those areas. This will again, it's a real successful way to target people depending on geography. We found that targeting geography within the Facebook tool is really beneficial to families who are interested in your school. Also, if you can use Google Maps has a data program where you can upload a spreadsheet with all of your student addresses and you can visualize it on a map and you can see where targeting might best be spent. There is, and we provided a resource guide, which you'll see at the end of this, but we have a step-by-step guide and a YouTube link with a video guide on how to create lookalike audiences. Next, we'll talk about building an outreach team. This is really important when you're running a lead generation campaign. We found that lead generation campaigns to be the most effective for student recruitment. Goals for this team, you want to provide, of course, you want to contact anyone who is filled out a lead generation form within 24 hours of them filling that out. The other goals they will provide information about the school, answer any parent inquiries. A lot of times parents fill out this form and they're not ready to register, but you answer that 1 or 2 questions and like, yeah, this is what I needed to know to apply, right? They also would be walking them through the application process. I find that if you're going to be calling a parent and they're ready to apply with them right now over the phone. Do not wait for them to go onto School Mint and apply there. I would try to walk them through the phone, whether it's an online application or a paper application, which is a good thing to note. If you are only using paper applications at your school, especially now in the world of COVID-19, no one wants to touch paper or pens or go out into your school and fill out an application. If you do not have an online application, now is absolutely the time. Any barriers you have to families being able to aptly fill out an application, you want to eliminate and remove those barriers if you can do so. So I would recommend online applications in addition to paper applications. Other things, tracking conversations. Look, you're going to get a lot of parents who are like, oh, you know what? My kid is, he's only 4 years old. He won't be starting kindergarten until next year. It's a good time to like build up your next year's lead list, right? So track conversations, make sure you're marking people who you can follow up with next year. But also, if you have parents who apply to your school using the Common App, they've probably applied to multiple charter schools. It may be that one touch point that makes the difference between them actually enrolling in your school and not enrolling in another charter. So those touch points are important for an outreach team. Again, hot leads should be followed up within 24 hours. There are firms that actually will do this for you, but we do recommend you do this in-house. Next, we'll talk about creating and placing content. This is an ad from Girls Prep. You want to make sure there's ads. There's a lot of stuff on Facebook and you need to capture someone's attention. So the ads breakdown is you have a visual, can be a photo, multiple photos, a video. You'll have a headline, some text, and a call to action. Sign up here or apply now. These I would test out with different campaigns. Graphics that work, we've seen photos of scholars that are actively and joyfully learning, teachers engaging with their scholars, and also graphics without photos such as infographics or icons representing different offerings. Anything that is kind of flashy, eye-catching works, right? But it's also about your message. What are you saying? I've seen schools try to say, hey, we do chess and we're an all-girls school and we offer an international baccalaureate degree and it's just way too much. You want to get one message per campaign. So the person that cares about convenience and transportation, they're looking at that ad and they're getting that message. You want to run a couple of different campaigns with different messages, see what works and what resonates with your parents most, and then put money behind that campaign. That's the best way to kind of test the images and the messages that you're attaching to your ads. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over back to Allison to revisit the ad campaign process.
Great. So I know that was very brisk, but that was steps 1 through 7. As I mentioned, step 7 is where the resource guide will be the most helpful, because there are links to videos that are instructional and walk you through the back end of Facebook and how you would actually build each campaign and how you'd upload the content, how you'd write the copy, and then how you'd manage those ads moving forward to monitor the ads, see what's effective. I will say that in a quick 30-minute tutorial, you probably don't feel like an expert, but I do hope that you have the tools that you need to sort of see at least what the budget would cost, what your considerations are in determining whether or not you want to do this or you're ready to do this, and making sure you have a team ready to support with the outreach. Again, we are willing to answer any questions that you may have now, or if you think of anything later. I'll share our email addresses. This is just a screen grab of what the resource guide looks like that we'll be sharing with you. So we'll have additional resources around how to stay up to date on Facebook's evolving ad policies. So there are like digital ad nerds who just are in this every day. And when there's an update that is worth mentioning, they put it on this blog. So you don't have to do that. You just look at the blog. And then when you're setting goals, the second resource helps you decide which type of campaign is right to achieve the goal that you're trying to achieve. And then there's a few other resources here on determining and building your audiences, creating and placing ads, and then evaluating those ads throughout the process.
Thank you all so much. So we do have some questions that have come through in the chat and the Q&A that I'll pose for you all. But before I do that, I will reiterate that the deck, as well as this incredibly helpful one-pager that the Underdog team has put together, will be available along with a recording from this webinar on our website later on. So feel free to access it there. So, and I will acknowledge, as the folks from Underdog know, and conversations we've had leading up to this is absolutely not my forte. And I might fall into the category that some other folks listening in might fall into, which is they know someone at their school is doing this. They're sure their school has digital ads. And so I would love for you all to sort of speak to that person, and you can imagine that it's me, listening in right now and saying either, I'm sure this is being done, I know that we have digital ads, and or I know that the world has changed. And so Liz asked a good question in the chat, saying she's done this for years and it feels very different right now. And so is that something that you're hearing, and or is there, what would you recommend that anyone who's been doing this for a long time do right now to make sure that they're getting sort of maximum impact for these efforts?
That's a good question. So the most recent campaign that we just finished off ended sort of, we were like 2 or 3 weeks into sort of the COVID-19 world. And we still continue to see pretty good results through that time. And this was like, basically we ran it for 2 months and it ended like 2 weeks into when parents were home with kids. And I was almost wondering if, because parents were home with kids, they were like, dear Lord, I need my child to go back to school, maybe this school, I'll apply to this school. So I think, you know, I'm not sure what you're seeing, if you're seeing a drop off or if it's getting harder. Maybe parents just have lower bandwidth right now and for the next few months because they're still trying to figure out remote learning, but maybe over the summer they can kind of pick their heads back up and think about educational opportunities moving forward.
But is there something that that folks either in that situation or generally, if they believe that they do this, what could they walk away from this conversation today and say, I'm going to go do these 1 or 2 things to check in on the status and efficacy of these ads?
Great. So I would first check in with the staff who are managing them, and I would ask what the rate per lead currently is. I maybe first ask, what types of campaigns are we running? Awareness, lead generation, engagement. And I would kind of like pry and ask a lot of questions. So what types of campaigns are we running? Which types of campaigns are you seeing to be the most effective? Are we running lead generation campaigns? That's a huge question. A lot of schools are not running these. And And then if you're running a lead generation campaign, what is our rate per lead? And have we seen that, like, how are we trying to manage that rate to stay as low as it possibly can? So I'd ask, like, when we first put the campaign up, what was the rate per lead? How long has the campaign been running? What is the rate per lead now? And what are some ways that we could get that rate back down? Because I imagine it's gone up.
And so if you think that a lot of schools are not doing lead generation campaigns, could you say in one sentence, what is the difference between a lead generation campaign and what you think many schools are currently doing?
I think most schools are running awareness campaigns and engagement campaigns. So they're trying to boost the content of that they're posting, which is great. And a large audience is seeing it. But they're not running a lead generation campaign, which is when you create an ad that when clicked on, it asks parents to give you their contact information.
Got it. And Rachel, hey Rachel, also asked, and I think relevant to this conversation, do you recommend direct apply ads in addition to lead generation? Or only lead generation? And I think Liz had a sort of similar follow on in terms of the efficacy that you've seen in terms of landing pages, which I would consider direct apply, but please clarify if I'm misunderstanding the distinction.
I think you can run ads for both direct apply and lead generation that's native to Facebook. I think there's actually benefit in running ads for both. You really want to be testing them against each other, though, to see which one is being more effective than the other. So there's not necessarily a downside to running either. If it's possible to do that, I would actually recommend it. But making sure that you're tracking your data closely, so you're not, maybe someone applies on Facebook and does the direct apply. Now they're kind of lost in the process and a little bit confused. So making sure you're managing the process very closely and effectively is going to be critical there. But there are benefits to running both at the same time. So I would recommend that, yes. Additionally, if you have a lead generation form that's on your website, that's another great way you can try and mix things up and try other forms.
I would just add that I've seen sometimes a drop-off. Someone will click on that. It'll lead them to Schoolmint. They'll fill out 2 sentences and they'll just stop filling out the application overall. So sometimes I think the thing about lead generation, it gives you a personal touch point. And I feel like any personal touch point you have is going to give you an advantage over your competition, right? So those touch points, especially now with the Common App, if that is the world you live in, that touch point is really helpful in converting an interested parent into an applicant.
Yeah, and we've actually,
yeah, and
I just want to say we actually have tried this. So I want to, like, when we were driving ads directly to Schoolmint, we saw a massive drop off. They were actually like not very effective at all. And the same with anytime you're driving people to click on your ad and go to a page where there's like a cumbersome process that's not just filling in like 1 or 2 cells of information, just assume you're going to lose them completely. So try to get that quick information from them, their name, phone number, and email, which, just to be clear, when you click on a lead generation ad, a little box pops up in Facebook. So it's not even taking me anywhere else. I'm still in Facebook and I'm just filling that information in quickly. If you have a native application that lives on your website, and Max mentioned this, then you can be running 2 campaigns simultaneously. So you're running a lead generation campaign to grab everyone you can, and you can run a website traffic campaign. You drive people from your website traffic to your website on the landing page where the application is, and then you can, because you own that website, you can retarget ads back at those people. So if they only fill out half and give up, you can keep sending ads specifically to those people, because you can use, it's kind of complicated, but you can embed a Facebook pixel on your website to capture those people's data and retarget them using Facebook.
And we provided some information on how to set up a Facebook pixel in the resource guide.
That's awesome, because this is where I'm like, when I was a school leader, I was like, I know we have someone who does this, and that's where my expertise ends. Another great question, though, I think in particular around this idea of the power of lead generation as a specific type of digital ad as opposed to just awareness generating, and this idea of personal touch point. And I'll just say, being digital ad dumb, that it does feel like now more than ever, that feeling of personal touch point, the ability to know that there's a person who you can talk to who will answer your questions. And in particular, because it's possible that one of a potential source of new charter enrollment could be from private school families who are deciding to make a change. And so that ability to make that personal touch point is really powerful. So great question in the Q&A. Do you have any tools or recommendations about the best way to track those conversations and really ensure that follow through is happening either within 24 hours or after some initial conversation or touch point?
I can take this unless you want to take it, Joe.
I mean, this is the challenge, right? Managing people and teams and making sure that people have an hour or two a day to follow up. Like it's really management. I've done it in spreadsheets. Literally, you can literally upload all of the lead generations that you receive daily. So if you get in Facebook, you can upload that into a spreadsheet. It's really kind of easy. Once you upload to a spreadsheet, just kind of developing some tracker to where you're tracking the people that you were able to contact, people you weren't able to contact, and people you need to follow up with. We can also provide some different trackers that we have created for follow-up for lead generation.
One thing I would add too is it's good, whoever is managing the ads, and you want to keep the teams really connected. So if you have an outreach team, that should be well integrated with the people that are actually managing the ads, because there should be a feedback loop where, say I'm on the outreach team, I might realize that say you drop 100 leads into a tracker and I call through them, there might be some really significant trends happening with my outreach where one specific ad set, like maybe the image of the girl learning with a microscope generated the best parent contacts or something, and that's good information to get back to the ad team.
Yeah, or the types of questions that parents are asking, right? And I think the advantage of working in charter schools and is that so often the schools are so high-minded and ambitious and aspirational about their school communities. And then sometimes the questions are things like, do you have free lunch, right? Do you, how does transportation work? Things like that. And so I think that's a totally great observation. So how global would you say these, certainly you all have done this work with schools in New York City, although I will say I know that you've done similar outreach work not related to student recruitment in other geographies. But, Michael, I'm guessing that you're with the New Root School here in Ithaca, New York. Are there considerations for different types of geographies in terms of urban versus rural, size, things like that? Or is this sort of in the world of Facebook and Instagram relatively universal?
I would say the main difference that I've seen, and I think it's useful across the board, but I would say the bigger your audience is, so if you're recruiting for students in Brooklyn or Manhattan, the more options you have as far as like narrowing in on targeting a lot more. So for example, my ideal is to be in a highly populous area, and then I can draw a circle on the map and I want to get students from this area, and I want parents of kids in middle school who look like my current students' parents. That's really easy to do when you have a highly populous area. When you're doing ads in maybe a town or a mid-sized city, sometimes there's just not really additional targeting that you can do. You're just targeting to that town, which makes it very simple. You're not trying a million different audiences and experimenting with a lot of things, but you're just sending ads to the town, basically.
Although I will say, Allie, when I was working with schools and a school had a particular need for a certain age group, while you're right that geographically there wasn't a lot of parsing that could be done, I was actually really stunned at the ability to target parents of children of a certain age. And so that would be also my feedback back to a school like New Roots, which is you might not be able to split it into geographies in Ithaca in the same way that someone in Brooklyn could split it into geographies. But if you are looking to fill seats in certain age demographics, am I right, Allie, that is something that is possible?
Yeah, the searching, so there's different types of targeting. One is like interest-based or demographic that you can still do in smaller towns or mid-sized cities. What sometimes doesn't work, and it might work in Ithaca, I'm not totally sure of the size, is using a lookalike audience. Sometimes when you upload current parent data to then broaden it out to a lookalike audience, there's just not enough people to make it a worthwhile investment. And Facebook will tell you that. So when you try to do it, it will tell you, don't do this, it's not working. So
that's not an example where Facebook will steal your money. That's good. That's good. And so similar questions, and then I think we'll say thanks and wrap it up. But how narrow geographically can the targeting work? And is there sort of a minimum number of seats or leads for which this is effective? And then Bruce is also asking, is there a demographic for which the strategy isn't effective? And I'll just put the asterisk and say a demographic that is relevant for the purposes of this conversation. I would have to guess that much older age groups, for example, probably Facebook and Instagram, but those much older age groups are potentially less likely to be parents of school-age kids.
Yeah, I would agree with your last answer. Also, you asked a few questions and now I'm losing them. What were the first and second?
Is there sort of a minimum size in terms of scope of geographic area or number of seats that you're attempting to enroll?
I don't think so. I think the best thing about digital advertising is that the scale of spend is just very adaptable. So sometimes this is particularly helpful in thinking about some of the political campaigns we work with. So they'll be like, well, I don't know how much money we're going to have next week to spend on digital. And I'll just say, well, what do you have? Let's just put in what you have. You'll get out what you put in, and the more you can put in, the better. So even if you're only looking to recruit 20 students, I think that digital is a great means to attempt to do that.
All right, and so I said that was last question, but last question, and potentially the most important. Can you talk a little bit about, I know from your advocacy work that you guys know how important it is from a mission perspective and a moral perspective to serve students of the highest needs. So students with disabilities, English language learners, all of those sort of highest risk categories. Can you talk a little bit about the intersection between some of the tactics that we've just discussed and also wanting to make sure that schools are really reaching the students and families who need them the most?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one way that I've done this, and this is very specific, and Joe, Max, maybe you can kind of broaden this point out, is highlighting the work that you're doing. So we worked with a school that served a lot of special ed students, and the results, they did a tremendous job with these students. They really specialized in serving special ed students. So we actually put ads out about recruiting students with potentially special needs or who learn differently or who had IEPs. And we sort of felt like that was a kind of a great way in almost a PR standpoint to highlight the great work that the school was doing, but also to get more of those students because this is the best opportunity for them in that part of the city.
Yeah, agreed. I think the school that we were working with had 30% of their students had IEPs, and in targeting that, I don't want to say it's not, I wouldn't, there are ways to target geographically, but I don't like to do that, geographic targeting. I do think messaging, the school's offerings, they had very specific small class sizes, and different things that they have promoted. So we put a couple of different messages together on those ads. And I think those actually did really well. We found that those speaking specifically to how we are serving special ed and students with IEPs was really, really worked well. Of course, the thing about that is you're going to get a very specific, so you may spend a lot more money targeting those folks because they are a very specific, type of person you're trying to recruit. So I would say, yes, in messaging, you can target those folks. You probably will spend a little bit more money trying to get them, but and through your messaging, less geographic.
The other, just one thing I just realized is, so if you're a school that's serving sort of students from all different types of backgrounds, and perhaps you're trying to, there are some schools that are really trying to have a very a balanced racial makeup or socioeconomic, kids from various socioeconomic statuses, and you want to make sure that the pipeline or the wait list or the applicants that you're coming in are, you're sort of casting a wide net, so you're not getting, I know especially in the context of Brooklyn, like as neighborhoods are gentrifying, you're seeing the demographics change in your schools. And if your goal is to really continue to serve the kids with the highest need, what you could potentially do is utilize the lookalike audience tool and target based on demographics, based on the types of students that you currently have that you're trying to find more of.
That's super helpful. And Joe, what I would just say that really resonates about what you were both saying about the messaging. I know when I was running a school and we were really focusing on increasing English language learner enrollment, we sort of said like, well, we'll really figure out how to have a robust program for that when we have more students that need the program. And what we realized was no one's going to sign up for the program that hasn't been built yet. And so what actually drives enrollment is your ability to really say to families that your priority is giving their student what they need, regardless of their student characteristic. And I firmly believe that charter schools are doing that. And so thinking about how to make sure that comes through in all of their messaging, but in particular, digital ads for student recruitment. So I apologize to anyone if I misinterpreted or didn't get to field your question, but I am sensitive to everyone's time. Thank you, Joe, Allie, and Max. And I know I speak for them when I say that they're happy to continue to be resources. We will post a recording of this webinar, the deck, the one-page guide that the Underdog team referenced on our website later on this evening. And certainly, please feel free to reach out if there's anything that we can do to help you all on this important endeavor. And with that, we'll say adieu.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.